Okay, I think we have already started. So you can see I've tried to put the text as a large image today, and I've even got my face on at the same time, which shows that I'm making progress with the way that I'm understanding this, or the way that I understand this Restream website, which I think is fantastic. I think it really does offer a lot of different functions, and I don't know all the things that I can do with it yet. I'm still trying to learn. I can, for example, put a chat on the side, but I know that as soon as I put a chat there, a lot of people will complain that the writing gets smaller. And so I won't put the chat on the side. I'll just, I can still see your comments. And so I can see them on my computer screen, but you won't be able to see what everybody else is saying. But if anybody makes a good point, of course, I'll talk about it. We'll do it like that. Now, this is an essay that one of my students sent to me for marking. Yeah, he wanted me to mark his essay. And I think that when I get a writing, I can very often see a lot of issues that need to be dealt with. And it's the same when anybody sends me a writing. You can see very clearly what kind of things are a problem. And so, for example, in this essay, we will see that pronouns were a problem: this, that, these, and those. But we'll look at a lot of other things as well. So let's read the essay. I really liked the content, by the way, of this essay, because it's a subject which it's a topic where I would certainly agree with the author about some of the points that he makes in this essay. I think he's absolutely right. So hello, Jenny, Naveen, Victor, David, Romelia, and Naveen again. Thanks for saying hi. So let's get started with the very first sentence. And I'm going to have to bring that back up. Now, sometimes I miss a little tiny spelling mistake like that. I hope you can just all see that I've corrected that. The aim of this essay, and essay we spell with an E, is to highlight how the Western food industry could be responsible for an escalation of health issues amongst undeveloped countries. Now, I made a few suggestions here. Firstly, certainly, I'm sorry I missed that. Sometimes you do miss spelling mistakes. So it should have certainly been essay. The aim of this essay is to highlight how the Western food industry, now we need an article here because we're defining which industry, the Western food industry. Okay, and it's really specific, so it needs a definite article. We're not talking generally. So how the Western food industry could be responsible for. Now, I preferred this to could be accounted for. We don't actually use account for like that. You might say the Western food industry accounts for a lot of the junk food in the world, something like that. And it would be similar to the Western food industry is responsible for a lot of the junk food, but I wouldn't say it's exactly the same. And it's because to account for, when a person accounts for something, for example, and a person might be asked to account for their whereabouts on the night of the murder so that they have an alibi. Yeah, and account for means explain in what way you're responsible. So to account for something means to explain rather than be responsible for. And it should be used in the active rather than the passive. But I didn't think that's what, I thought the student wanted to really say that the food industry is responsible for the escalation of health issues amongst undeveloped countries. And here I changed, well, I do suggest you use developing because that's the most common way of referring to the lesser developed countries, let's say. Undeveloped is even considered, I suppose, a little bit harsh or a little bit negative. The idea that they haven't developed at all is contained in undeveloped, and so we say developing. Okay, let me just see if I've had any comments so far, because I can't see what you're saying when I'm looking at the essay. So I will be pointing out all the errors, yeah, and explaining them. So let's get back to them. So these companies, yeah, notice he's got a plural noun here, companies. And so we need these or those. Now he wrote those. And I'm afraid we would say these companies if we're referring to the companies in the Western food industry. These means the previously mentioned noun. Those are when you have two previously mentioned nouns and you are referring to the second. It's a bit like this and that. They are very similar, where this is the previously mentioned one and that is the second previously mentioned one. So here, these is, we don't have two, and so we have to say these. These companies are in a rush. They're not living a rush. That doesn't. That's not a saying or an idiom in English. We say these companies are in a rush, as never seen before. Now, this was what the student wrote at the end of the sentence, but I wanted to put it earlier. I used commas I suggest putting it earlier with commas, just because this is an adverbial, and this adverbial phrase is referring to these companies are in a rush. They are in a rush as never seen before, and they are not. I didn't think that this was referring to conquer consumers worldwide as never seen before. And to make it clear that it refers to in a rush and not to the later part of the sentence, to the later verb, it's not modifying to conquer new consumers worldwide, it's modifying are in a rush. And for that reason, I would put it earlier in the sentence. It sounds better to me. And so there's a lesson here, which is try to keep your adverbials fairly close to what they are describing. If you don't, there's a danger that they will be misinterpreted as modifying some other part of the sentence. And you've got to be careful with your modifiers. Make sure it's very clear to the reader which verb you're modifying with that adverbial phrase. So hold the industry accountable sounds good. Yeah, hold the industry responsible sounds good. And you can even say hold the industry to account, and that would be the same. So there are a number of different phrases we could use there. So next, I changed it to this, and this is a really subtle point, and I don't think it's often pointed out, but I'm going to try to make this as clear as possible. It is a pronoun, and this is a pronoun. However, it we tend to use to refer to noun phrases only. This can refer to entire clauses. It can refer to verb phrases. It doesn't have to refer to a noun like it does. Now, what was predicted here? What was predicted was that companies are in a rush to conquer new consumers worldwide. Yeah, it was this was predicted. This company's being in a rush was predicted as the outcome of the process. Okay, so because it's referring to the entire previous clause and not to one noun that was predicted in the previous clause, because of that, we need to use this. You use this for verb phrases, and really you use it to refer to nouns and noun phrases. Okay, and that's why it sounds better with this. This was predicted. I did think of another example here to try to explain to the student why this is the case. Can't remember what that example was. It was something like this. We are going to take on 50 new staff. This will make us highly competitive. Something like that. And not it will make us highly competitive. Yeah, we're going to take on 50 new staff. This will make us highly competitive. It just makes it much clearer with this that you're referring to the previous sentence, that you're referring to that whole sentence. Okay, I think it is much more common for, there are some cases where it might refer to a clause. I think in extraposition, when you have the verb phrase later in the sentence. I mean, really, usually it's a noun clause or something like that, actually, but it can refer to a later noun clause, but we use this just to refer to clauses. It seems to me that would be, it doesn't sound right with it was predicted. It doesn't sound like it's clearly the previous sentence. So this was predicted, the previous sentence, this, as the outcome. Yeah, it's got to be the outcome and not as outcome, as the outcome. And remember, noun of noun. I think when you've got noun of noun, it's usually the noun of noun. And we have got noun of noun here because we've got outcome, noun of the process, noun. So usually it's the noun of noun. That's something which I think can be quite handy when you're writing. So the outcome of the process, first described or first defined by Herbert Schiller as digital colonialism. So this is an interesting topic, and this name that Herbert Schiller came up with for what's going on involving the Western food industry is excellent, and I certainly agree. It is a form of digital colonialism, and it's going on right now. So yeah, not nominated. To nominate somebody means to choose them, very often for a prize. Yeah, you nominate somebody for a prize, or you nominate somebody for a position. Nominate means choose. It doesn't mean name, even though I know etymologically it's related to name. I really do. I'm sure that that's the case. But so I do understand that to nominate might mean to name in certain other languages, but really in English, we just use it for to choose. Okay, if you can hear the rain, there's a terrible storm at the moment, but we won't let that bother us. So in other terms, I didn't think that this was very natural. We usually say in other words. I've never heard in other terms. And for that reason, I took it out and suggest in other words. I think it sounds much more natural. This phenomena implies cultural assimilation. Now, this assimilation, cultural assimilation, we're talking about generally. We don't mean one of many. If you say a cultural assimilation, it sounds like one of many. But I think here we're just saying that this phenomena implies cultural assimilation, generally speaking. So in recent years, this flow was catalyzed by widespread internet access. Excellent. The flow allows massive cultural advertising campaigns. Yeah. And so here I don't mind it, because then it's referring to this flow. Yeah. This flow was catalyzed by widespread internet access. This flow allows massive cultural advertising campaigns. If you don't want to say that, if you want to refer to the whole of the previous sentence, then you use this. This allows massive cultural advertising campaigns. So either or here would work, which obliterate regional habits relating to alimentary practices. Now, you might be able to hear that the author of this is a medical man. Yeah, we certainly say the alimentary canal, meaning some part of the digestive system. But I've got to be honest, and I'll admit it, I looked up alimentary just to be sure of exactly what it meant, and it does mean dietary, nutritional. Yeah, it means pertaining to nutrition, pertaining to diet, and so it's the correct word. But I still warn all of you that the examiners will be much more familiar with nutritional and dietary, and so it might be an idea to use those words instead. But I've got no problem with alimentary. I've got no problem with not knowing every word in the English language. And certainly examiners shouldn't have a problem with it either. They should just check the dictionary, see that it's correct, and then carry on. But just to let you know that it's not a very common word, alimentary. It's more common as alimentary canal. So it's not a word that I often use, but perhaps it's just a blank spot for me. So relating to, not relating with. Yeah, I didn't understand as those really, but it's always relate to with that verb. Relate. Dependent preposition is to, it's not with. So these influences, notice I've changed those again to these because we've just mentioned the influences. And so it's these influences, it's not those. We don't have to here, and it's these, blah, 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 but those, blah, 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 blah. That's when you use those, when you've already mentioned these. Yeah, those is the second, but these is the first. So these influences have a large impact on the youth. Now, this is a very important point, in my opinion. If you say to impact on, if you use impact as a verb, to me, it will always sound as a mistake. Yeah, it never, ever will sound correct. I will never use impact as a verb, with one exception in dentistry, which is where you talk about impacted teeth. Or maybe diet, where you talk about impacted stuff that you digest can be impacted. And if somebody doesn't go to toilet for a very long time, you might talk about impacted feces or something like that. But that's the only way that I see impact being used as a verb. I don't understand this to impact on somebody. It means nothing to me. But I keep seeing it. And I think that it's come in from, I think it's a foreign influence on the English language. And I think that because it's an international language, we actually have a lot of foreign expressions that make their way in that perhaps a lot of natives wouldn't use. But be aware that for me, you can have an impact on something, but you can never impact something. That's ridiculous. You might, I mean, yeah, impacted teeth and impacted food and things like that are the only things which I can think of which are impacted. But yeah, I would never use it as a verb other than those two very rare situations. So these influences have a large impact on the youth, have a large influence on the youth. Yeah. Now, I didn't understand, maybe for inherently higher susceptibility, but I kind of got the impression that he meant one of two things. Maybe he meant making the youth more susceptible to a variety of diseases, because of course, you know, these bad dietary habits, they do lead to higher susceptibility to a variety of diseases. But maybe he meant perhaps because the young are more susceptible to advertising. And that's very possible as well. And so I put underneath, perhaps because they are more impressionable. And it's just because he uses susceptible to a bit further down. And so I didn't say susceptible to advertising, but impressionable means more susceptible, more easily influenced. An impressionable child is a very easily influenced child. And of course, people are highly impressionable. All people, adults as well as children, perhaps even more than children. They are also impressionable. So I offered two suggestions there. Okay, let's go a little bit faster. I think we'll only do 2 paragraphs today, and we'll do 2 paragraphs tomorrow. But let's keep going. So one consequence. I didn't like one first consequence because it sounds weird to have one first consequence. Then that means you might have 2 first consequences, but you can only have one first. So the first consequence, or one consequence, of what must accurately be defined as the heavy consumption of junk food is, now you can hear that this is quite a wordy sentence. Now, I tried to get rid of some bits because I didn't really understand that, but again, I could see accounted. Please remember that to account for means to explain, really. So that didn't seem right here, but I tried to keep it as similar as possible to the original. So one consequence of what must accurately be defined. Now, please notice that I've changed the position of the adverb. I did a lesson on adverb position not so long ago, maybe 2 or 3 days ago. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is actually the second piece of writing I've checked today with a couple of mistakes with the adverb position. So I know it's a really common mistake. So please try to remove this mistake from your own writing. Make sure you put these adverbs when they're in the middle of the sentence, when they're in the mid position. They really do need to go between the first verb and the second verb. Yeah, the first verb is the modal verb must. The second verb is be. So must accurately be defined, and not accurately must be defined. Yeah, put it in the middle of the verb chain. There's usually a verb chain in English of a modal verb, a main verb, or a modal, a main. Yeah, or a modal, an auxiliary, and a main. You get have been done, yeah, have been married, or will have been done. That's for will have been done. Stick the adverb between the first and the second. Yeah, and if you follow that procedure, you'll get it right 99% of the time. Okay, we've got some comments, so I'll quickly see these. I'll quickly have a look. Could you kindly do a lesson on essays? Yeah, that's okay. So hello, sir. RE, impact as a verb. I'm afraid you're fighting a losing battle. Okay, this is interesting. When a phrase is in common usage, it becomes accepted. Well, I'm still aware of a number of phrases which are in common usage, but that doesn't mean they're right. Yeah, I can think of all sorts of things that people say, like, well, for example, would you ever say that it's correct to say there is cars on the street? And yet that's exactly what we hear in millions of songs. Yeah, all the time. Yeah, imagine there is no countries, I think John Lennon sang. That's terrible English. I'm never going to be able to admit that that's going to become the normal way of saying things in the future. I don't think it is. I don't think there is plus plural noun will ever happen, even though it's everywhere. And so I think sometimes some things will remain as mistakes, even though lots of people use them. I don't think it's a I understand the argument between prescription and description. I really do. And, there's nothing wrong with speaking with the same mistakes as natives. Why not? Yeah. But of course, some people would like to speak better than the natives who make mistakes. And if they do, then I strongly suggest that they don't use impact as a verb. But I know what you mean. I know that it's everywhere. But for me, I don't hear any natives saying it. I just see it written in articles, very often that I believe are written by foreigners. So I think it's a foreign expression. I don't think it's an English expression. Anyway, let's come back here. So make sure your adverbs are between the first and the second. Yeah, must accurately be defined as. Now, I added the heavy consumption of junk food just because I don't think junk food just being there causes people to become fat. Of course, you've got to consume it first. And I think with these essays, you have to be pedantic. Yeah, you have to explain exactly what you mean, even if you think it's perhaps obvious, it might not be. And so just explain exactly what it is. It is, of course, the heavy consumption of junk food. The consequence, of the heavy consumption of junk food is that the population in these countries has got to be because we're defining which population, which one, the one in these countries. And I would actually say which countries as well, in Western countries or all over the world, if you mean, in every country where they're eating junk food, okay, is that populations in all countries or in these countries would be clear that you mean, actually, you haven't really mentioned countries. So is that the world population is becoming fat. Yeah, and that's really what we want to say. And we want present continuous here is becoming rather than, well, you could put it in present simple, the world pop, because then it sounds like zero conditional. You could do it something like that and say, as the population eats more junk food, they become more fat. There's nothing wrong with that either. Okay, so this is true. I changed this from that is true. It's got to be this is true if you're just referring to what's just been said. This is true, especially among the youth segment, which is more susceptible to advertising. We need to make it clear that this is an adjectival clause. So we put in a relative pronoun, which, and then we got a nice adjectival clause, which is more susceptible to advertising. So here he's talking about the youth being more susceptible to advertising. As a result, all obesity-related problems have shown a marked rise. Among them, not between them. And it's because between refers to two objects. It doesn't refer to intangible things anyway. It's physical things between. But among can be more than two. And okay, we're not talking about people, are we? We're talking about problems here, among these problems. And it sounds to me like there's not just two. So we need to say among these problems, diabetes in some places has reached epidemic proportions. And we got to use present perfect. And I've tried to use something which is very natural because we do say epidemic proportions. It has reached epidemic proportions. Okay, so I've changed a little bit there just to make it clear that this is how we would say epidemic features. We don't say that. We say it has reached epidemic proportions. Similarly, the same thing could be said about heart diseases. Now, make sure you've got a subject. You can't go without a subject in a sentence. Yeah, you can't say similarly could be said. I suppose you were trying to use the adverb similarly like a noun, but you can't. You've got to say similarly, the same thing could be said about heart disease. These aspects. Now, I changed this sentence, and it's because of parallel structure. And it's something that I recommend that everybody study if they want to improve their English. Because in my opinion, it's precisely how you improve your writing, but also how you improve your speaking. So what is parallel structure? It's making sure that when you've got a list or when you're using to be or when you're making a comparison, that you always use similar blocks of language, let's call them. It's actually similar parts of speech. Now, the original sentence was these aspects either yield worse life quality or even are maybe responsible to shorten life expectancy. Now, you can hear that that's quite a long, clumsy way of saying the following, which is really similar to what the student actually wrote. I changed it to these aspects either. Now, either is a correlative conjunction, either X or Y. Always remember parallel structure with correlative conjunctions because it sounds great. And if you use it, it does get noticed. So these aspects either worsen life quality or even shorten life expectancy. Yeah, and can you hear how you've got either verb that ends in en, life, noun that ends in y, or verb that ends in en, life, noun that ends in y. Isn't that nice? It's so easy to read. It's so clear. And it's because it's taken into account parallel structure. Okay, that's the only reason why. You can see how similar worsen is to shorten. Worsen, shorten. Life and life are the same. And you've got quality and expectancy. They both end in a Y, so it sounds great. And so I've put underneath, do think about this. It really is how you improve your mark. And any parallel structure provides clarity, brevity, and euphony. And so it's well worth doing. Avoiding parallel structure or just being unaware of parallel structure is not a good strategy. It's a much better strategy to be very aware of what that is and to try putting it into your writing, because the more you put it into writing, the more you put it into your speaking. Okay, so thanks, David. I'm pleased you like the last vocabulary class. I'm going to leave it at just those 2 paragraphs for today, but I hope I've justified why I've made some changes there, and I hope it will be helpful for my student. Just obviously, I want him to know exactly why I've made all of these corrections, and I want to use more of his work to show everybody certain things to avoid. And he's a really nice guy. Obviously, he doesn't mind me doing this. I did ask his permission. And his answer was, I would be delighted if other people could learn from my mistakes. So a big thank you, a big clap for the author of this essay. I won't say his name to protect his identity. But thanks, everybody, for watching. I do appreciate all the praise and compliments. And we will carry on doing more writing practice tomorrow. I'm not sure what time, but I usually put it up on vk.com. What time? Maybe I'll try on YouTube, but I don't think they share anything that I say, so I think it's a waste of time. So I will be back tomorrow, maybe morning, maybe afternoon. But keep an eye on my vk.com page if you want to know exactly when. It will probably be morning or afternoon, I'm not sure. Okay, so thanks, everybody. Do appreciate all of your support. And I hope to see you all soon. I hope the writing was nice and clear today.